Hi, welcome to the first episode of the Benchmarkers Rugby Show. My name is Kumbi and I am one of your co-hosts. I'm a data scientist, but more importantly, in the context of these videos, I am a rugby enthusiast. I am joined today by my other co-host. Would you like to introduce yourself, sir?
Yes, welcome to episode 1. My name is Nyasha. I'm also a data scientist. But for the purpose of this show, I am more of the numbers guy, the analytics guy, and Kumbi is the rugby expert. Right.
Well, we're gonna stay away from from using terms like expert, but yeah.
Hey, listen, Kumbi. There's no need. There's no need to be humble. Okay, right. You're
Right.
you're the biggest rugby fan I know.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So the way we've set that up is. Kumbi watches a lot of rugby, but he has a really good analytical mind. I am on the data science side. I really use the numbers to tell a story. So, and then we do try compare how the numbers match up with the eye test, right? Which has come to some pretty interesting conclusions.
Right. And I think we'd like to think of ourselves as the perfect tandem, really, because since world sports in general is becoming more, I think sports analytics is having a bigger influence in world sports in general. You've got Nyasha, who's going to be bringing in the data to you. I'm going to be bringing the context to that data. So I think would like to think that we're going to be catering to both sides of the camp there, the enthusiasts of the game as well as the numbers gurus as well. So hopefully you'll enjoy the content that we're going to be bringing to you going forward.
Yeah, I like the word numbers gurus instead of numbers nerd. Now that's really kind of you, Kumbi.
It's the same.
Right. So starting off with the recently concluded under-20 Rugby Championship. Right. So what we did was Kumbi and I listed our top 5 players. I'll talk you through my process, and Kumbi will talk you through his, and we just compare our lists. So my list again is more from a numbers perspective. So using an AI model that I created, I picked important KPIs, and for those who don't know, KPIs are just key performance indicators, right? So these are metrics like the number of meters you've run, the your kicking accuracy, the number of meters you made past the gain line, things like that. But I was looking at 145 KPIs. I fed those KPIs into a big data model. It gave everyone a score going from 100, going down, and I picked the top 5, and I'll compare those to Kumbi's. And Kumbi, if you could describe your process.
Right. I think one of the interesting things that's going to be happening on this show going forward is that we're going to have, like Nyasha said, and as we've described before, we're going to have perspective from your numbers, right? So we're going to have these lists and these rankings coming in from the numbers side, but then you're also going to have enthusiast side of things. So basically, the interesting thing is going to be the difference, right, in the selection process. Because for me, for example, for this top 5, right, one of the massive things, I think the first thing that I'll mention is that I think the under-20, we've had under-20 returned this year after being absent for, I think, 4 years since 2019. So I think that was just like, there was an excitement around the community, the rugby community in general. But I think also you'll find that I tried to pick one guy from a different team, because you don't want to be too biased, right? But I think the number side of things is just going to look at who was the best performance, right? So I tried to look at the best players from each country. I tried to pick one player from a different country in my top 5. How those players influence their specific, their particular teams. How I think they could transition into the professional game going forward as well. So I factored all those things as well as the stats. So I think that's kind of the difference between me and the data model that we've used.
Yeah, cool. So, do you want to take the lead?
Okay, I can start us off.
Your top
Yeah.
5?
Okay, right.
Yeah.
So, like I said, I picked my five guys come from different teams, right? So it was a bit difficult to pick five out of more than 100 players, but so my five guys are as follows: David Odiase, who is the Italian captain and number seven; Make Springer, who was the top try scorer. I think he showed quite massive finishing ability. I had Mordecai Murray from Fiji. I think. For Mordecai Murray specifically, I think he's got. If you look at the graphics that we're going to provide for you, we so Mordecai Murray basically attack and defense. He basically showed versatility in his game, right? So defensively, he had some of the top stats in the competition, and then offensively as well. And I think if you look at Fiji in general, right, because I'll talk about him a little bit, more than the other players because I think he was my favorite player in the tournament. If you look at Fiji, traditionally they play a very loose game, right? So they like to offload and do all sorts of things, and they're quite dynamic. So I think it's very nice to see one of their players picking up and adopting that traditional gameplay, but also to have your flanker then also have the foundational parts of his game also be solid as well. I think that's a massive positive for Fiji and rugby. So those are the first three players, but then I also decided to pick the two players that impressed me the most from the top two teams, the two finalist teams in the competition. So from France, I picked Baptiste Genoux. Hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. I hope I'm not butchering it too much.
It's perfect.
Right, yeah. So I mean, I'm sure the French people, will tell us how to pronounce that in the comments. But so I liked how he had a very balanced game, his attacking, his kicking, and I think if you look at the way that the French team, the best number 9 in the world, or the best player in the world, really, is Antoine Dupont, the French number 9. I think if you've got a guy who can kind of emulate, he's not up to that standard, up to Dupont standards just yet. But I think if you've got a very good balanced game where you can kick and you can run the ball as well, I think that's a very positive sign once again for French rugby. And then lastly, my fifth player is Brian Gleeson, who is the Irish number 8. Once again, I think the Ireland under-20 team also tried to emulate as much as possible the Irish professional team. So, they played wide, once the ball was shifted wide, they had guys looping, running different running lines. But in order for you to do that, you need a guy who can first penetrate the middle of the puck, right? And that's where Brian Gleeson comes in. He's not the best when it comes to stats, right? So he's not going to lead stats in, every single category. But I think he's a hard worker in the middle of the puck, and he gives guys opportunity to then go wide. I think once again, if you've got guys like Peter O'Mahony, who's the Irish veteran, who are now probably going to retire after the World Cup, and you've got a guy who can, who's basically a workhorse as well, who can then come into your ranks as well. I think it's a massive positive, right? So I think if you're looking at these 5 guys who have listed, and you're the professional teams, I think you probably have a smile on your face. So yeah, so these are my top 5, and that was basically my process. Right, so Nyasha, you can probably give us what the numbers are saying.
Okay, and just also for context, obviously, big data analytics it's just a tool, right? Right. That's not the be all and end all, and we do try find synergy between Kumbi's method and mine. So with that being said, here's my top 5, and I also give you their power ranking score. Now this power ranking is selected by the AI. Like I said before, it goes from 100 going down. It's a relative scale, right? So this is within context of this tournament. But with that being said, number 1 is Harry Godfrey from New Zealand, the New Zealand fullback. He got a score of 100. And then number 2, we have Mark Springer, who's also on Kumbi's list, right, with a score of 99.
The system works apparently.
The system works. And just look at some of his stats. One of the key stats, he was first in clean breaks, right, and joined first for the number of tries. So I can see why he was selected. Number 3, we have Morgan Morse, which from Wales, I hope we're pronouncing that correctly, with a power ranking score of 96, right? The 8th man for Wales. And now this guy, just looking at his stats, at least the stats selected by the model, he was in the top top two, top three for a lot of key things, right? So he's second in the number of runs, dominant carries. He was third, with 25 carries across the gain line. He was first. Rucks won. He was first. Defenders beaten. He's joint second. Which for a big guy, for an 8-man, really impressive. And number of tackles, he was seventh. Right. So here, when the model brings back these stats, it's pretty clear why it selected him and outlining specifically these KPIs. Number 4 is Baptiste Chenou, which if you don't like my pronunciation, I just stole it from Kumbi. But again, I hope that is I hope it is correct, right? And he has a power ranking score of 94. Again, just looking at the stats, joined first for try assists, the scrum for France, carries across the gain line 7th, supported carry meters 2nd, and carry pick and go meters joined first. Now for this particular stat, it's not particularly a stat I've seen analyzed a lot, and that's one thing I do like about the model, in that obviously while looking at 145 KPIs, it can pick out things that wouldn't traditionally be selected. So like carry pick and go meters. That's something I did have to look up, but it's clearly very important, and he was joined first in that. And in number 5, we have Nicolas Deportier from France, with a power ranking score of 93. Now again, another brilliant talent. Just looking at his stats, with his defenders beating, he had 21 defenders beaten, which ranked him 4th. Joined 4th for try assists, clean breaks 2nd with 8 and 25 points. So obviously these are massive talents, and hopefully they get, at least everyone on this list gets selected for their teams in the upcoming World Cup. Now, I guess one thing of note is Kumbi and I have two players in common, which I think speaks to how the eye test can match up with the data analytics model. And yeah, Kumbi, what are your thoughts on the list?
100%. I think we've got two players in common, Marque Springer and Baptiste Chenou, because I think sometimes you've got basically my selection came from how these guys are influencing the game for the most part. Two of them mainly were statistical, Springer and Murray. So I think it's a good thing that one of those players then showed up in the data. Was now one of the outstanding players that was pointed out in the data. But then also one of the other 3 players of mine were more how they influenced the game, and how their team relied on them, and they basically led their teams going forward. And I think it's also good that one of those players who was the French number 9, Baptiste Chenou, was also highlighted by the data. So I think this is it's fantastic when the eye test and the data correlate.
Absolutely. Now, moving on to the next segment. The next segment of the show is powered by Athstat Marketplace, the best marketplace to get digital memorabilia directly from teams, athletes, and brands. If you're a sports fan or an athlete, visit athstatmarketplace.io and start creating and sharing memories. A link in the description.
Right, for the next segment, we're going to start, we're going to talk about Test rugby, right? So obviously this is a massive year for international Test rugby, with the Rugby World Cup starting at the beginning of September. And we've named this segment The Road to World Cup, right? So, just a simple name.
Yep.
And basically what we're going to be doing here, we're going to be talking about, like we've said before, we're going to be talking about what the data is saying based on how it relates to the team's playing styles. We're also going to be talking about how teams can also then match up with those different playing styles based on, whatever team they're playing against. And for this video, we're going to start off by talking about the Rugby Championship, right? That's just concluded last weekend, all right? So just to give you a bit of background for those, who might not be caught up yet, the Rugby Championship is the Southern Hemisphere tournament involving New Zealand, South Africa, Argentina, and Australia, right? So usually each team plays the other 3 teams twice, but because of the Rugby World Cup this year, we had a shortened calendar, which means each team played the other 3 teams only once, right? So after last weekend, New Zealand won because they won 3 out of their 3 games. South Africa came second because they lost 1 game to New Zealand. Argentina only beat Australia, which means they came third, and then Australia lost all their games, which means they came fourth. So what we're going to do for this video is we're going to talk about the most recent games, right? So when Argentina played South Africa, New Zealand played Australia, right? And we're just going to talk about what the data said based on what the data said their playing styles were, how the games played out, what we expect how we expect the teams to perform going forward, right? So we're going to turn back to our resident data specialist. Nyasha, could you present the data for us?
Yeah, sure. Right. So this is just a miniature analysis. Okay. Wait. Yeah, sure. So yeah, this is just a miniature analysis that we did. Creating a mini report just to show where either team, right? Right. So obviously there was New Zealand versus Australia, and I mean Australia's run of form is a little bit unfortunate, but it happens to the best teams, every once in a while. And Eddie Jones, give him time. And South Africa versus Argentina, right? So just a quick analysis of the game. Right. So if I just open up this document and this is our analysis again. These KPIs are picked up by the machine learning model, right? Deemed to be important, and they do change. They do change per game. But anyway, this is what we have right now. Starting off with Australia versus New Zealand, which personally I didn't expect New Zealand to be so dominant over Australia, right? Obviously, I don't know if Kumbi shares my sentiments, but if we just look at the report, we group these KPIs, in certain categories. So obviously starting with territory and kicking meters, and then we have the possession and line breaks. And then we have defenders beaten and tackle success and turnovers won, which I guess these are the more defensive ones. Looking at New Zealand versus Australia, New Zealand 53%, 50% territory, and Australia 47%. That's close. Kicking meters though, New Zealand had 775, and then we look at possession again, line breaks, defenders beaten. More than double the defenders beaten, and tackle success. 84%, turnovers won. And just looking down here, we can see that New Zealand wins in every key category, right? So they were dominant in basically everything that was important, at least according to the model. And then there's some recommendations down here at the bottom of the screen, right? So obviously New Zealand had more game control, just clearly shown by the territory and the possession. Australia didn't find efficient offensive solutions, right? You can see that by the defenders beaten and the line breaks, whereas New Zealand did, and the New Zealand defense showed great effectiveness. And obviously, if you watch the game, that was pretty clear. Now, yeah. So in summary, New Zealand outplayed Australia in almost all parts of the game, right? And Kumbi, so over to you. How does this compare with what you saw, while watching the game?
Right. I think if you just look at the data, it's quite clear that New Zealand dominated. It reflected on the score. But I think with Australia, so clearly New Zealand had a much better game in basically almost every category, right? Not just these key categories. I think if we kept on looking at the other aspects of the game, you'd find that New Zealand came out tops. But I think with Australia, it's a little bit difficult to analyze Australia at the moment because they do the right thing for a little bit of, a portion of the game, but then they get things wrong at critical moments, right? So if you watch the game, so hopefully if we, as the videos, as we progress, we can start to show data as the game progresses, right? So we can show how many penalties they conceded, as the game goes on and so on and so forth. Australia had a really good start to the game, right? So I think they had a very good and clear game plan. They wanted to disrupt New Zealand at the rucks, right? And at the breakdown, so they they didn't win too many turnovers, but then they slowed down New Zealand's ball at the breakdown, right, which was very effective because New Zealand, when they tried to go wide, they were also in their faces. So New Zealand didn't really have all that much success at the beginning of the game. And actually, I think close to the first half, the score was 7-12 to New Zealand, right, which isn't much of a massive difference. But then a critical moment, right? So New Zealand just scored. They just go up as soon as they went up 12-7. Carter Gordon gets the kickoff. He fails to take it over the required 10 meters. New Zealand get a scrum at halfway. From that scrum, they get a penalty. Two things happen in that case, in that situation. Instead of New Zealand didn't get a penalty, that means they can kick down towards New Zealand and get a line out in Australia's half. But then the second thing, at that scrum, Alan Alatua was the captain and their prop for Australia. He gets injured, he ruptured his Achilles, right? So just that one mistake, right? All of a sudden, you're in your own half, you're defending, and your captain is injured, he's gone. Now you have to bring in Taniela Tupou, who's also come from an injury. He hadn't played all year and so on and so forth. So I think if you can look I think that's one of the things from then on, because Tupou also got injured at that point, everything just went downhill from there, right? So they capitulated. So I think we have to look at it from that context to say, okay, they had a very good first half, especially at the beginning of the first half. And I think as a coach, you kind of look at those positives and say, okay, maybe that's one thing that we can take away from the game. As long as we don't make silly penalties, silly turnovers, and silly mistakes, we can, and be a little bit more consistent as the game proceeds. I think they could give out some better performances. So I think, that's one positive that Australia could take. Even the first few games, they've conceded penalties at the critical times, so they basically shot themselves in the foot there. So, so I guess that's a positive to take away from Australia. Hopefully we can see them, pick up on that and then, grow from that performance this weekend.
Yeah. I mean, well, obviously you're very optimistic. But yeah, I do.
Yeah, we have to be.
You have to be, exactly, right. Yeah. So, do you with this coming weekend? Do you think the score will be anywhere near this? Because I do agree. Obviously Australia started off playing well, right? Maybe the scoreline would not have been as bad. If but anyway, you see that, and that's the thing with the top teams like New Zealand. Find weaknesses, they exploit them. So do you think with this coming weekend's game, they'll lose by a similar margin, or it'll be a little bit closer?
I think it's probably going to be closer because obviously at the time when we're recording this, the teams aren't out yet. But I think the expectation is that New Zealand's going to field a much less experienced side. So I think they're going to bring in the fringe guys who they just want to see what these guys are made of. I don't know if I'm pronouncing this correctly. Sam Penny Finau, the Chiefs flank, he's in the squad, but he hasn't played. He probably play Cam Roygard. So they probably want to just see how their 33-man squad, which will be announced next week Monday, is going to look like. So I think they're probably going to play the guys that they're not too sure about. So I think because it'll be an inexperienced team that will be fielded, by my expectation, I think Australia are probably going to be a little bit closer. Hopefully,
Okay.
Yeah, hopefully we'll see a closer game this weekend. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the odds aren't in our favor, and we'll look at the odds at the end. But as things stand, the odds are not in their favor. But then, still, it's just obviously unfortunate that they've lost their last 5 games, and it's very difficult for a team to rebound from that. But of course, the World Cup's coming. They need to psych it up, and I do believe they'll, pick up form. Yeah, so, looking at the next game, which is South Africa versus Argentina, I personally didn't expect the score difference to be so close, right? If anything, South Africa, really almost lost that just by looking at the scoreline. Now, looking at the KPIs, right, it looks like South Africa was dominated in a lot of key KPIs, which is, of course, reflected in the score. Right? And again, these are picked up by the model. So just looking at territory, 24% less kicking meters, 225% less. Possession, South Africa had less. They had more efficient carries, which is how many of your carries go across the gain line. Fewer defenders beaten. Yes, more tackles. But penalties conceded. They conceded two more. Now, looking at this, Kumbi, right, and then also just comparing it to the game, because Argentina dominated in four of the seven, right? So at least according to the model,
Right.
these are the important things. One, does it speak to Argentina's strength, or does it speak to the resilience of, let's say, South Africa? Because typically when they are the defending champions, but when a good team loses in a lot of key metrics, and they still go on to win, right? It's two stories are told. Either this shows that this is a great team, and even when they're down, they
Right.
found a way to win, or it shows that Argentina were just a little bit unlucky and were the better team, right? So just what story did you see?
Yeah, I think you can argue for both, but I think I chose to see. Well, what stood out for me was that South Africa, managed to dominate regardless of how the stats played out, because I think Argentina
Yeah,
really put pressure on them. Like they attacked that they attacked the South Africa in their own half, but then they just couldn't find any change from that, right? So
yeah,
they couldn't find any tries. I think the score was 22-9 in the 75th minute. So you look at the score, it's 22-21, right? But
yeah,
then Argentina scored two very late tries, right? So which means they, regardless of, I mean, despite their dominance, they just couldn't score, right? And I think the one thing that South Africa won, which was a key stat, which was the carry efficiency,
yeah,
right? Because South Africa can be on the back foot, but basically what it shows here is that they've got better guys who can win the contact, right? So defensively, South Africa can absorb your attack, right? So you can't really punch through them. You can't really score tries against them, right? Because they're more physical. But then on the other side, when they've got the ball, they can make more efficient carries as well, right? So that's, I think, when it comes to South Africa, I think the story that stands out for me is that South Africa, regardless of whether they're losing every other stat that we're looking at right now, the fact that they can still dominate and win the game and be 22-9 with up with 5 minutes left.
yeah,
Because really, Argentina at the end of the game, they weren't. I wouldn't really say that they almost won the game. I think it was just two late tries, with
yeah.
South Africa one man down. Yeah, so I think South Africa was the much more impressive. Even though Argentina was very impressive in this game, I think I was much more impressed by South Africa's resilience in this game.
Okay, great. So, I mean,
Yeah.
two things. Do you rate South Africa to win the to retain their title?
Oh, these are hard questions, man. These are difficult questions to put in there. Yeah, no, this is going to be tough, and I think this is one thing that I'm going to enjoy about the predictions that we're going to do. It's going to be very tricky. I
Yeah,
think there's a lot of teams that can win the World Cup, right? Looking at how New Zealand are performing so far this year,
yeah,
France is looking good and they're at home. Ireland is the best team in the world. South Africa defending champions. One of those four teams can win. But not only that, outside of those four teams, I think England can surprise us as well.
yeah.
It's going to be interesting. I'm not going to make any predictions, but yeah, it's just going to be interesting to see how it plays out.
Well, I'd say I'm not going to make any predictions, but it's kind of what I do.
Right.
Although I won't make predictions on who's going to win the World Cup. Yeah, and the second thing is, obviously they're playing this weekend. Yeah. Do you have South Africa winning again? Do you have it winning this time? I guess comfortably. What do you think Argentina picked up where they could improve? And could
Right.
possibly take the win this time. Who do you have winning?
Right. I mean, obviously, no doubt the data is going to say that South Africa is going to win. I think that's, but
Yeah,
it's a bit tricky to call once again because it depends on what approaches the two teams take. Right at this, at the time that we're recording this, South Africa's named their team. They've basically named a B team, right? In
yeah,
quotes. But they're resting their players. They know that their best what their best players can provide. They want to see what other guys can bring to the game. Guys like Evan Roos and all these other guys. So they're just giving them some game time. We
yeah,
don't know what approach Argentina is going to take. Whether they're going to field their best team And if they do, I think they've got a very good chance of winning at home. So it's a bit tricky, but I'd say South Africa is probably it doesn't matter what team South Africa fields. I would say they're probably the favorites going in against a team like Argentina.
Yeah. I mean, obviously they have really good squad depth and a lot of experience.
Right.
And,
Yeah.
Obviously it helps being the current champions. There's a certain air of confidence there, right? Obviously
Right.
there was a time when they didn't play much rugby in the last couple of years, but they are getting there. Right. So now just looking at the odds because. Like I said, he's a bit hesitant to make predictions, but I
For now, yeah.
for now, right. Well, to be fair,
Yeah,
right.
right.
I don't know if should I claim credit or should I say the model made predictions, but yeah. So anyway, looking at the predictions we have on screen, it shows South Africa as the favorites to win again against Argentina and. New Zealand, I guess no surprise there. To win against Australia. Again, these are just predictions. These are the odds, right? And the odds. We do have a Discord channel where we post up these odds as well as odds for the other coming games. As you all know, there are a lot of international games happening now, and we're looking at everything. Rugby is basically life now. So
100%.
you can look at the link in the description to our Discord channel, where we'll post the rest of the odds there. But this has been our analysis. I don't know, Kumbi, if you have any final words.
No, I think just a final remark. I think I'm very excited, for what's to come, for the journey that's ahead, and I'm really hoping that our audience, you guys enjoy what we bring, the content that we're going to be bringing to you going forward. We talk about predictions and all that. We're going to be predicting different things, ranking players, ranking teams. Talking about different aspects of the data and how it plays out and the context. As it relates to how it plays out in the field. So I think I'm very excited for us to come.
Yeah, definitely. And one thing I found interesting in your analysis, I mean, obviously, when a player is sent off or a player is not available on injury, the data really shows what happened, and we're getting into a place where it shows why these things happened, such as injuries, red cards,
Right.
things like that, right? So I mean, these are two worlds that are not apart. Like I said, it's really about the synergy. But I am excited. We will see you next week, same time, same place. Looking at more rugby.
Athstat Experience.